Welcome to Food Friends, a podcast inspiring home cooks to try new dishes in the kitchen by sharing trusted recipes, tips, and friendship. Hi, I'm Sonia.
And I'm Carrie. We met in Los Angeles over 15 years ago as personal chefs and haven't stopped talking about food since. We're so glad you're here.
Hi, Carrie. Hi, Yumna.
Hi.
We're so happy to have you today. We've both been big fans of your work online and on Instagram and on TikTok and on all the platforms.
Thank you so much. I'm also a big fan and so happy to be here.
We have to start the way that we always do, which is what did you have for lunch today, or what are you planning to have for lunch today?
So Mondays are my recipe testing days. And so that was yesterday. And so after recipe testing days, I usually have 6 random recipes that are coming up on the website or are being retested. And so one of those recipes was Greek chicken bowls. The recipe makes exactly 4. My husband had a dinner meeting last night, so I get to have the 4th one for lunch today, which is so lovely.
Perfect.
More than I would normally be having for lunch. So I'm lucky sometimes when I have leftovers like that. Otherwise, I would usually be throwing together random things in my fridge that I'm trying to use up.
What goes in the bowl?
This one has like a marinated chicken and it goes on top of rice with tomatoes, cucumbers, olives, feta, and tzatziki. It's really good.
For anyone just discovering you, you've built this incredible community around sharing recipes with your platform, Feel Good Foodie. You've been doing it for over 12 years, and your ethos is definitely healthy-ish Mediterranean.
Yeah.
But let's back up even further. You were born in Congo, raised in Sierra Leone, and you moved to Michigan at age 11. And famously, I love on your site that you say that you learned English watching Saved by the Bell. That's a personal detail I really enjoy. But you also began your professional career in marketing. So what was the inspiration for working in food media, sharing recipes, and starting Feel Good Foodie?
So I worked in marketing for about 10 years. And while I was on maternity leave, I was thinking about just where I was living and where I was at that point in my life. I had a 2-year-old and a baby, and I was thinking about what are key things that I want these kids to grow up with. And one of the core memories that I grew up with was just having home cooked meals all the time. So something that my mom took pride in was, and especially because of the circumstances of where we lived, just always having home cooked meals. So I thought, I want to learn how to cook better for my kids and not just, the simple things that my mom taught me how to make, but I want to expand beyond just that, especially where we used to live in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. We had farmers market next to us, and there was always such amazing fruits and vegetables that I was discovering. And then I was on Instagram just personally and just seeing so many fun accounts that are sharing about watermelon radishes. And then I was seeing things like rutabaga at the farmer's market. And I was like, well, I want to learn how to cook with these things. I want to learn what chia seeds are and how do I make oatmeal better for my kids. And so I got really inspired because of where I was post-maternity leave, trying to lose a bit of weight, but also trying to provide these nourishing meals for my family and give them those memories that I grew up with as well, these home-cooked meals. And so I decided to learn how to do it publicly on Instagram. And I thought, why not? This is kind of cool. And if nothing else becomes of it, I get to just share these fun meals. And then I was also kind of thinking about it professionally as well, because at that point I had a lot of experience in different types of marketing, but I had never done anything with at the time, what was it called? It was online marketing, or it wasn't even called social media marketing. And so I was like, well, I want to learn that part of marketing too. And maybe this could be my way of learning about it and just trying to find. So there was this personal reason for it, but also this business-minded background in the back of my head that just kind of propelled me to push forward a little bit more with that.
One thing we love about your work is this idea of Mediterraneanizing everyday American recipes. Can you explain a little bit more of what you mean and how that works in your practice? Like, how does that work in your kitchen?
I got inspired to do this because of my mom. So when we moved here, my mom would make spaghetti, for example, but she would, not have oregano. She'd realize, oh, you're supposed to make spaghetti with oregano. I don't have oregano. And so she would just throw 7 spice in it. And the 7 spice is something used in a lot of Lebanese meals. And we would tell her, this is so good. This tastes better than it tastes at the restaurant. And we'd be like, what did you put in it? She'd say, I had this thing in 7 spice and I just threw it in there. And so when I started Feel Good Foodie, I wanted to give my own perspective on the way that we cook meals. And I didn't want to just create another American site. And I also didn't think I had enough knowledge to create like a full-on Mediterranean website. And so one of the things I started to do was I started to take familiar American recipes and give them a Mediterranean twist with just 1 to 2, maybe 3 ingredients. And so in a way, it's just like changing up the flavor notes or changing up some textures. And so one of the things I like to do is, like in my cookbook, for example, we've got strawberry pancakes in there. And the secret ingredient in there that Mediterranizes it is adding rose water. So I just add a teaspoon of rose water to the pancakes, and it just gives them this floral scent that's sweet and subtle and just really unique. But everything that I ever substitute is always like, you can easily, if you don't have it, you can easily just do vanilla extract, for example. So it's a way for me to take things that are familiar, but just add something special to them, but in a way that's not intimidating at all and can easily be substituted.
Lebanese food is also just definitely in like my top 5 cuisines worldwide. And the freshness and the spices and the flavor profiles and all the herbs is really similar to also how I cook in my own kitchen. And what you're talking about is a perfect segue to my next question, which is, are there 3 to 5 Mediterranean ingredients you reach for the most when you're transforming a dish? Are there certain ingredients that you rely on over and over again?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of them is definitely feta cheese. There's so much that you could do with feta cheese, and I was the creator that made the whole big feta pasta go viral. And so just seeing, I mean, it wasn't even my recipe. It was just the way that I approached the recipe into the video that made it go viral. But just seeing the potential of what feta could do there, I started thinking about what else could I do with feta. So feta is one of those things that I reach for because it's just a different kind of cheese that you can add to mac and cheese. You can add to scrambled eggs. You can add to pasta salads, of course, but also in grain bowls and on pizza. There's just so many fun ways to take regular cheese and switch it up to feta. I also really love dates. I love tahini, olives, and I would say just using oregano, for example, just really just changes the profile for a lot of things and just makes them brighter. And then tons of lemon as well.
You know, you mentioned the pancakes that have a little bit of rose water in it. And so I was wondering if you could walk us through a specific example of another American recipe that you've Mediterraneanized. What are some of the ways that you could take out something and add in a Mediterranean ingredient?
Another example would be banana bread. So with banana bread, for example, it's something that people make all the time. And there's different types of fats that you can use to make banana bread, and butter is a big one. Instead of using butter, people have done applesauce or oil or just different types of things. One of the things that I love to do is to swap some of the butter for tahini because it's a fat that just is easy to swap at a 1-to-1 ratio. So if it's a recipe calls for a cup of butter, and my recipe only calls for like half a cup of butter because it's healthy-ish, so we're not using a whole cup. But I would swap half that butter for 1/4 of a cup of tahini, for example. And so it's an easy swap. You can throw it in there while you're throwing in the butter. And then in the end, it just gives it this like little bit of a nutty hint. You still have the banana flavor and the cinnamon, and it all just is really well complemented with the tahini. So I think that's one of them that I absolutely love to make. And it's a fun, easy swap to make.
That's such a revelation that's a 1-to-1 swap, because I definitely use tahini a lot in my kitchen and I use it in my baked goods, but it never clocked to me that it could be swapped exactly that way. And that's such a good tip because it adds a savoriness and a creaminess to baked goods. Like I definitely add it to cookies. So I love that. And I love that you're reducing the butter and the fat content a little and probably, amping maybe a little bit of the fruit or other ingredients.
Exactly. Yeah.
So smart. Yumna, you've had the almost uncanny ability to catch viral waves. The baked feta pasta that you mentioned, of course, I can't think of anyone who pays attention to food who hasn't seen that recipe, but we will link it in the show notes in case you haven't. Also, your pasta chips, your cottage cheese ice cream, those are just to name a few. We understand that there's not a formula, because if everyone knew how to create a viral recipe, we'd all be doing it every day all the time. But looking back on all the recipes that have hit with your audience, what do you think actually makes recipes resonate with home cooks?
So I think that even though there isn't a formula, the one thing that I try to do is I try to start with something that's familiar and then adding one like curiosity factor to it. So it's like you're using tomatoes and pasta and feta cheese, for example. And people have done those combinations lots of times, but warming it up and turning it into a sauce, that was just like so unique and so different. So as soon as I saw this recipe, I was like, this has the potential to go viral, and it is not getting any attention. And so immediately it just clicked with me that it could do this. And a lot of times I'm like, oh my gosh, this could definitely go viral, and it doesn't do that thing. And so it's starting with something familiar and then just swapping one thing that makes it feel unique. So it gets people thinking like, wait, is she really like melting that cheese that we've never melted before or we're not used to melting? Or is she really swapping half the butter for tahini? Like, can you actually use tahini that way? And then I also think that the visual aspect of it is very important as well. So the final result needs to really look appetizing, whether it's melty, whether it's crunchy, whether it's just colorful with lots of different layers in there. So this visual aspect of it needs to grab your attention as well. Otherwise, I mean, if it doesn't look good, it's just going to miss.
Do you have an example of one of those recipes you thought was going to take off and then it didn't? And maybe is there one of those that you wish more people would try? Maybe it didn't get marketed perfectly, but like it's really such a winner in your eyes.
Yeah, cheese cookies, taking like flour and butter and salt and adding grated cheese to it and nuts instead of adding sugar and chocolate chips, for example. And I shaped them like cookies. I baked them. The whole process was very similar to just making chocolate chip cookies, but with grated cheddar cheese instead. And I was like, this is genius. It's something that's familiar. People love cookies. People love cheese. And it's just savory and it's going to go viral and it's just going to be like such a shock factor. And it was like, man, people were like, cool, but not really. It was one of those things that just didn't take off. And I think the reason it didn't take off was because it just didn't look as appetizing. It looked like cheddar biscuits.
Because it sounded almost like this thing I made even just last week. I make all the time those 2-ingredient or 3-ingredient crackers where it's shredded cheese and almond flour and water and like nothing else.
Yes.
That's like, it's like a very popular cracker. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I wonder if it's the word cookie versus cracker, and then also the look of the texture and why recipe names matter so much. That's something Carrie and I talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that matters a lot too. And especially, I recently shared something called dry yogurt, which I thought was like a really cool phenomenon. But I think the fact that it's called dry yogurt, and many people have shared this before I did. And so I thought, oh, I'm going to do a spin on it too. And I'm going to give it some fun colors and do raspberry or strawberry powder and use a little bit of spirulina, the Blue Magic spirulina to make it blue and pink. It's going to look so cute. And it didn't do anything. And I think it's because it's called dry yogurt, and dry yogurt just sounds like leftover and spoiled and something you wouldn't want
Right.
to consume, And it's basically, the recipe is similar to making lebne, which is an Arabic spreadable cheese made from yogurt.
We do talk a lot about how people ask us, why do we choose certain recipes to talk about? And so much of that, as I imagine the same as for you, it's like you're looking through this sea of things on the internet and you're like,
Yeah.
what is the name of this recipe?
And it's a reality. It's like when we talked about mung bean. Mung bean is not an attractive name
No,
for a bean. If it was
no.
called pearl bean or, sweet green bean, like
Yeah.
it would just already you want to eat it more, even though mung beans are amazing and delicious.
Yes.
But
Yes.
how do you sell people on them? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I definitely agree with that.
So, is there also maybe a recipe that you are surprised took off that you really love, but you're like, I don't think people are going to get this?
Oh, yeah. I have a good example, and that would be stuffed onions. Stuffing any kind of vegetable is something that is so popular in Mediterranean and the Middle East and in East Asia. And there's,
And
we
Eastern
stuff
Europe and my
squashes
family.
in Europe
Yeah.
in general. There's so many things that are stuffed. And I didn't really grow up with stuffed onions, but the concept of just stuffing a vegetable was something that I was like, oh yeah, we do this all the time. And so I started seeing a couple people stuffing onions, and I thought, let me see if I could do this as well, but use my own Lebanese ground beef, rice, and 7-spice kind of mixture and see if it takes off. And for some reason, that was like 21 million views. It completely took off and it did way more than I thought it was going to do. I've definitely shared stuffed recipes before, like stuffed cabbage and stuffed grape leaves, and they've just done kind of okay. They've done well because people like to see the process. They're curious, like, oh, how did she stuff her cabbage? Because in Ukraine, you're stuffing cabbage very differently than we're doing it in Lebanon. And so people are just always curious to see those things, but they never actually go viral. But this one went crazy viral. And I think it's just something about how satisfying it is to like peel the layers of the onions and then just kind of like seeing all of those layers in the dish and just how it looks at the end. And then in the end, just knowing that it's rice, beef, some spices and onions and a tomato sauce, which feels so approachable, but yet so unique and interesting at the same time. So you're taking things that are familiar and just using them in an unfamiliar, different way. But that one took me by surprise too, because I just thought it was going to be one of those hard, traditional looking recipes that wouldn't do what it ended up doing.
Stuffed onions. Like I loved any
Okay.
stuffing vegetables is a huge part of my family's cooking.
Yes.
Cabbage, zucchini, peppers. I think also the sweetness of onions. But I think you're right. There's this visual component that's really gorgeous and appealing. And
Yes. And then the onions just transform their flavor. So the way I started that video, I said, if you hate onions, you need to try it this way, because if you hate onions, it really doesn't taste much like onions. Because my kids who hate onions love this recipe because they become caramelized, they become sweet, they just become this vessel for the stuffing that's inside of them and smothered with the tomato sauce that just makes them taste so savory and delicious.
we have to talk about scrambled oats
Oh,
because
yeah.
it genuinely surprised people. Can you describe it? And what made you think this is a thing people need to know about?
Yes. So I'm queen of oats. I love oats. I have oats for breakfast like 5 days a week, probably, because on weekends we try to have more eggs. And I love to just try them in different ways. And I had seen some people starting to do this thing called scrambled oats. And I immediately thought I had to make it. And so the idea of it is basically mixing together oats with a banana, an egg, and even some yogurt and any kind of flavor you want. Usually cinnamon is very popular. So mixing everything together until they're well combined and then just heating a large skillet and just cooking it together like you would scrambled eggs, but you're literally scrambling the oats. And so what I liked about this is that it felt like you're baking oats, for example, but you're doing it on a pan instead. So there's this familiar aspect of when you would make baked oats or baked oatmeal, you use an egg, you're using a banana or something to sweeten it. But instead of doing it in a pan or baking it in the oven, you're just scrambling it on a stovetop. So it's fast, it's easy, it's visually really interesting. And then when it's done, it just looks like some kind of granola that you can eat by itself, or you can have it on top of yogurt. And so I think it was the simplicity and familiarity of the ingredients that I use. It's 5, 6 ingredients, but just the curiosity level of it was making it on a pan and scrambling it instead of just whisking it and baking it as is. I'm so happy that people are getting more excited about oat recipes and just eating them in different ways.
Well, that's part of my follow-up question too is you've developed so many recipes using oats. And so is there a recipe that you feel like is a little underrated, one that you love or that your family loves? And what way do you think home cooks should be incorporating oats more?
Yeah, that's a great question. And like you said, I love oats so much that I actually started an oats company called Oats Oats. And so it's basically packaged overnight oats that you would mix 1-to-1 ratio with milk to create this delicious overnight oats overnight. I do think that, people should be making overnight oats more often. I think it's something that kind of went viral like 10 years ago. It was this like really cool anomaly, and I made the recipe, and my recipe online has like over 100,000 5-star ratings, which was incredible because I think the way that I taught people how to make it and just my approach to it and all the different flavors just made it feel like you're having cake for breakfast. It was really fun flavors of blueberry and lemon, strawberry and peanut butter, chocolate chip, like peanut butter flavor, just really fun flavors that just made breakfast feel indulgent. A lot of my friends and family and like in the Lebanese culture, people just don't eat enough oats and they're weirded out by the texture of it. I have a lot of family members and friends who are like, I don't know, it's mushy, it's like weird consistency. I'm just not used to it. And especially having it cold as well. It got its hype like maybe 10 years ago. And I wanted to get its hype back again because it is such an underrated breakfast that can be such a blank canvas for people to add more nuts to it, add more fruit to it, protein powder, different types of fiber sources. And so that's one thing that I like to do for my kids, either using my oats overnight oats or just regular rolled oats with different types of add-ins. We make it the night before and it's like a little surprise for breakfast in the morning. You wake up and it's like, yes, I love yesterday me. I have oatmeal that's ready to go.
We love that. So behind all these viral recipes, you're obviously a busy entrepreneur, you're a wife, you're a mother. What are some of the dishes or recipes you're making on repeat at home for your family?
Okay, that's a great question. One of the things I love to do is sheet pan meals. And I always try to have a formula between the protein, the veggies, and some kind of a carb situation with it as well. And so one of my favorite things to do is to roast some sweet potatoes and any kind of vegetables that I have, and then throw some protein on the baking dish at the last like 10 minutes or something like that. So I'll start out with a baking dish that has sweet potatoes on there. 30 minutes in, I'll throw in some broccoli. Like 20 minutes later, I might throw in the chicken or whatever. And then sometimes it's usually 30 minutes, but when you start with sweet potatoes, it'll take a good hour for that. A really easy dinner. Everything is done in one dish. I take the parchment and I throw it away. And usually it's like super easy cleanup. Everybody's really happy. And then we can top it off with, I'll have different sauces because otherwise you're just having like sweet potatoes and chicken and something simple. And so a lot of times we'll just take like some yogurt and pesto and I mix them together and I drizzle that on top of it, and it just makes the dish come alive. Another thing I like to do is I like to make a lot of soups as well. I always have onions and carrots and celery in my fridge. I'll just throw them in there. And if I don't feel like chopping them, I'll just throw everything in together and then use my immersion blender, blend it all together. And we've got soup, and my family loves soup, and we'll just usually dip it with some kind of bread. And it's a good way to just use up remaining vegetables. Sometimes I have like half a bag of rice left over, like there's a half a cup and you don't know what to do with it. Or you have like 3 ounces of pasta left over and you're just like, it's not enough for a recipe, but those are the great things that you can throw into a soup. And it always feels like a full meal.
I love that you called out the immersion blender. I am a new owner of an immersion blender because Sonia gave me one for Christmas. And so I think that's such a helpful thing. Like just throw some things into a pot and make it creamy and serve it with some bread. That is enough. It doesn't have to be this crazy special thing every single night of the week.
Absolutely. I think that's so true. And one of the things, though, that I've gotten so accustomed to doing is making these Arabic stews, and I'll probably make one a week. I'll usually do them on Sundays. Growing up, my mom made them so much more complicated because she was using fresh tomatoes and she was using fresh garlic and fresh cilantro. And so what I do is I basically, because I make these types of stews so often, I have frozen garlic in my freezer. I've got frozen cilantro. And so once a month, I might just Actually, the garlic will last like 3 months. And so I will take a bunch of garlic, put it into my food processor and blend it up together until it's nice and minced. And I'll even start with just like pre-peeled garlic that I buy at the store. Grab a big bag, dump it into my food processor, blend it all together, and then just throw that in the freezer. I'll try to like perforate the bag so that I can see it's about a teaspoon of garlic where the perforations are. And then usually my food processor reeks of garlic, so I'll use that to make hummus that day. But then I'll have frozen garlic in my freezer. And I do the same thing with cilantro. I'll buy a big bunch, just chop off the end, chop it rough really quickly, even in my food processor, and throw that in the freezer as well. And so when you've got cilantro, you've got garlic, and then canned tomatoes, it's the base of any kind of Arabic stew. And then I use any kind of vegetable, any kind of protein, throw it all into a pot as well. Kind of like making a soup, and then we always just make a rice next to it. And so it's something that I grew up with. There's about 6 or 7 different stews, whether it's a green bean, a white bean, a potato stew. So there's all these different variations of them. And so I end up making that enough, and they always feel like a complicated recipe, but because I've set myself up for success in using ready items like a bag of frozen green beans and a can of tomatoes and freezing my own garlic, it makes the meal so easy, and it's literally ready. It takes me 10 minutes of prep and they're ready in 30 minutes. And so it's one of those things. And then I have enough usually for 2 days worth of meals, which is really nice to do.
This is such a good tip because I think a lot of people use jarred garlic, which is just not the same flavor. And we had an Ethiopian chef who did something similar where she would make pastes of garlic or pastes of ginger or a paste of garlic and ginger. And I know a lot of Indian cooks do this too. And then they kind of have a jar and they scoop that, and it's the basis of whatever dish they're making, whatever stewy curry or soup. Yes. But the cilantro to me is a revelation because I never think to freeze my cilantro. So it does retain that flavor really well, even if it's all chopped up.
It really does. And I would say with the cilantro and with the garlic, it's about 80% of the flavor, maybe, or 90%. It's not going to taste as good as like the fresh garlic and the fresh herbs. But so I end up using just a little bit more than I would if it was fresh that day. But I make it so often that I start to saute the garlic and cilantro, throw some tomato paste in there. You got the base, and then just throw whatever veggies, or I'll throw chicken cubes in there. I'll throw some like beef in there as well, and just let that simmer for half an hour while the rice cooks. And it's ready so quickly. And my family loves when I make them. I was actually traveling once for a few days, and my daughter, who's 15, was like, I'm craving stew, which we call a yasmin. She's like, I'm just craving that. And I was like, well, I'll make it when I come. And she's like, I really? And so I walked her through it, and she ended up making one herself, which I always thought was like such a complicated thing growing up. I never would have imagined making one of those myself because they look complicated, but I walked her through it and she's like, oh, everything is ready to go. It's all about what your family likes and just kind of creating it and having things in your pantry ready to go that you know you're using all the time.
And I think that also goes back to part of the way that you said you started this business was you wanted your kids to have the kind of food that you grew up eating. And now because of you doing this, now your daughter is cooking the food that you have been making her. That must feel so great.
Oh, it was the best feeling. And she took pictures while I was traveling and sent me what they made. And then I came back and I tasted it. I was like, this is great. You literally made something that I didn't even learn how to make until after I was married. And I was really impressed. And that was just such a fun moment to see her doing that.
So we end every conversation in the same way, which is, Yumna, what do you eat on your birthday?
Well, my birthday is in the summer. It's June 30. It's usually 4th of July weekend. And so ever since I was a kid, we've always traveled. We've always been somewhere. And I think my only rule is that I don't cook on my birthday. And so everybody knows that. And I will cook for you all the time. I love feeding people and I love cooking so much. But on my birthday, I will not cook. And so I need to just be pampered and taken somewhere. So I've just always had the best meals on my birthday. I always end up being on vacation somewhere, which is really nice. So that's my only rule for my birthday.
It's a great rule. Well,
Yeah.
we really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to speak with us. We're going to link all the ways people can find you and your amazing recipes and your beautiful content. We'll link them in our show notes, and we'll also send them all out in our Substack on Wednesday. But really, we thank you for being here. It's such a joy to meet you.
Thank you so much to both of you. It was just an honor to be on your show and to chat with you and get to know you a little bit more too.
Until next time, thanks for being our food friend.
If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with friends. We love hearing from you, so follow us on Instagram or drop us a line at foodfriendspodcast.com.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you and your food friends. Happy cooking and eating.